And good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. Happy Thursday morning to you. Hope your week's going absolutely fantastic. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. This is what I call my Morning Musings. I am sharing with you my thoughts on the Olivet Discourse. The disciples asked Jesus, when Jesus predicted the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, they asked Jesus, tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of the end of the age, or of your parousia and the end of the age? Jesus responded by telling them, among other things, about the birth pangs of Messiah. Now, please, you've got to see that everything I'm sharing here with you about the famines, the earthquakes, the pestilence, etc., and the persecution. When Jesus said they will deliver you up to the Sanhedrins, they will persecute you in their synagogues, you will appear before kings and before governors and before authorities as a testimony against them. Pardon me, Mark chapter 13, verse 9. Pardon me. Those were part of the birth pangs of Messiah. In the earlier videos, I've shared with you, this is a constant theme throughout the Old Testament, that the birth pangs of Messiah would give birth to, if you please, the kingdom, the judgment, the resurrection, the coming of the Lord. And so, when we study the subject of persecution, as Jesus predicted in Matthew 24 and 9, Mark 13, 9, it's not some vague generic persecution. It is rather very, very specific eschatological persecution for the cause of Christ, and it's Jewish persecution of the followers of Christ. This is so incredibly important. Now, in yesterday's video, I shared with you in Acts chapter 14, verse 22, where Paul went back through the churches of Lystra, Antioch, etc., confirming the saints and encouraging them, reminding them that, quote, we must, through much tribulation, enter the kingdom. Now look, for those who place the coming of the kingdom in the future, if you are not teaching that we must, not maybe, not might, not could be, but unless you're teaching that Christians must be persecuted to enter the kingdom, you are not preaching the New Testament doctrine of tribulation or the kingdom. You are not teaching the eschatology of Paul and the New Testament writers. And when commentators try to say, boy, this is important, when commentators try to say, for instance, a few years ago I attended a Bible class here in town, and the minister got up and he was teaching on Romans chapter 8, 18 and following. I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. And he said, I want to tell you, brethren, I want to tell you right now that the suffering of this present time, this awful stuff called cancer, heart attacks, marital problems, financial difficulties. He said, I'm telling you right now, this does not compare with the glory that will be ours in heaven. Well, in the first place, I don't doubt for even a nanosecond that heaven will be so much far greater than anything we could experience here or even imagine, but that's not the point of Romans 8. The suffering that the Romans were experiencing, Paul uses very important Greek words. Words that do not refer to the normal human experience of heart attacks, cancer, marriage problems, financial issues. That's not what those words refer to. But we'll talk about that more. Okay. What I want to show you is that just like Acts 14:22, Paul taught that the first century church absolutely had to go through this tribulation period to be purified to enter the kingdom. And once again, those who say, oh, well, the kingdom came on Pentecost. Oh, wait a minute. That must mean the followers of Christ had to be persecuted in order to enter that kingdom. It didn't happen. And yet here Paul is saying we must, through tribulation, enter the kingdom. Now watch this. Paul had established the church at Thessalonica, Acts chapter 17. Almost immediately, the Jews stirred up the rabble in the marketplace and started persecuting the church. In 1Thessalonians chapter 3, Paul said, as he encouraged them, that no one should be soon shaken by these afflictions. Well, there's this Greek word, thlipsis. For you yourselves know that we are appointed for this. For in fact, we told you before when we were with you that we would suffer tribulation just as it happened and as you know. Now I've got to double check the word here on affliction. It is a form of thlipsis. Yes, had a brain burp there. Do you see what Paul says? Paul says we are appointed to this affliction, to this persecution that's happening right here. This is the same idea as we must, through much tribulation, enter the kingdom. I love this word appointed. Kaimetha, from the Greek, or is the form used in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. It is a word used, for instance, in Luke 2:34. When Simon took the child, the baby Jesus, and said, this child is appointed for the rise and the fall of many in Israel. It's a word used by Paul in Philippians chapter 1 and verse 17, when Paul said there were those who were preaching the gospel, some hoping to do him good. And Paul said it really doesn't matter, because he said, I am set. King James says, I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. You see, God appointed him for that. We're talking about the divine decree of God that those at Thessalonica, those in the first century, those at Lystra, Iconium, Derbe, Antioch, etc., the first century saints must, through much tribulation, enter the kingdom. And thus Paul would write in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 5, he said, I praise God for your patience in tribulation, knowing that this is an evident token of the righteous judgment of God, that you might be counted worthy of the kingdom for which you suffer. You are suffering. You see what he's saying here? Suffering, kingdom. Tribulation, entrance into the kingdom. And let me say again, folks, if you are teaching or preaching a doctrine that says we may or may not be persecuted, and folks, let's make no mistake, this persecution that they were enduring was physical tribulation. Their goods were being confiscated. Hebrews chapter 10, 32 and 33. They were being thrown in prison for being Christians. They were being stoned. They were being crucified. They were being slain. That's the tribulation that Paul had in mind. That is not, being at work and somebody says, oh, you're a Christian, huh? Well, you're one of those fuddy-duddy Christians? Well, there is such a thing as verbal persecution, that's to be sure. This persecution, the words that, to get ahead of myself again, are used in Romans chapter 8, in which the creation groans, from the Greek word stenazo, and Paul used different words in Romans. He uses the word pasco. He uses the word thlipsis. He uses the word pathemata. All of these are a cluster of words having to do with overt persecution. That's the kind of persecution the first century church had to experience to enter the kingdom. the kingdom that was about to come. Hey, look, we'll have a whole lot more on this next week as we continue our study of the Olivet Discourse and Jesus' prediction that they would be delivered up to tribulation. In the meantime, don't forget, tomorrow we will continue our study, our review and refutation of Sam Frost's book, The Parousia of the Son of Man. Sam Frost agrees that, quote, the eschatological coming of Elijah then is John the Baptist, unquote. That is an incredibly fatal admission to Mr. Frost's futurism. So we'll take a little bit closer look at the significance of John the Baptizer as Elijah on the flip side. So I'll see you there.